welcome to the next episode of the podcast. My name is Kurt Getch with Drury Outdoors, and I'm joined today by Steve Stoltz. Steve, how you been?
I'm great, Curtis. Great to be on your show.
Thanks for joining us. We're just kind of getting started with this podcast thing. We've been doing a TV show for years, and decided to launch this podcast. So we're glad to have somebody of your stature join us and talk a little bit about turkeys. How'd you get started in the hunting industry?
Well, it was mainly my father, my dad. He was hunted all his life. His dad hunted. Hunting was rich in family tradition, and so my grandparents hunted, and my dad passed it on to my brother and I. My dad had a kind of a different way of spurring your interest in hunting when we were kids. Our job when we got old enough to skin a squirrel or clean a rabbit or clean a turkey, that's what we did when he got home if he was successful. And let me tell you, many hours of cleaning wild game made me want to go after him. So that's how I got my interest and start in hunting.
Awesome.
My dad was always interested in spring turkey, in turkey hunting. Period. He grew up in from a younger age, he grew up in South St. Louis County in an area called Oakville, Missouri. And there was an older gentleman in that area by the name of Bill Held. And Bill would come in my grandfather and my dad's hardware store. They had a business in Oakville. And Bill would tell turkey hunting stories. And my dad was already a deer hunter and a small game hunter and a bird hunter. He was an expert marksman in the Air Force and the military. So he was already very much into guns and hunting. And but the turkey hunt really intrigued him. And this was back in the late 50s, early 60s. Missouri didn't have a spring turkey season back then. So he got an invite to go to the state of Mississippi on a turkey hunt before Missouri started their turkey season. And my dad went. He was not successful. But that kind of spurred him into learning how to call very good, learning turkey hunting skills. Back then there was not a lot of information out there like there is now with your podcasts and television shows like you do. And, of course, stuff that I've been involved with Drury Outdoors for many, many years. Digital media, social media. There's so much out there now for a turkey hunter to learn. Back then, it wasn't. You had to learn by that old turkey hunter that would be willing to tell you some of the advice that many old turkey hunters wouldn't share. I mean, they kept their secrets very close to their hand. They didn't share their information that much less the information on where to go find a turkey. So that was back in the early 60s. So my dad got a taste of turkey hunting and calling then. And then sometime a few years after Missouri opened their first spring turkey season, so Missouri opened, I think, around 1960 or 61. In the early 60s, my dad finally got his first turkey. And, then from there, my dad was a very good hunter, very skilled, very good in the woods, good woodsman. And once he learned to call and actually call one in and got one himself, then the rest was history. He became one of the best turkey hunters that anybody in this area knew, or at least in the area that I grew up. I still work in St. Louis area, but I have since become an Iowa resident about 10 years ago. I've joined the ranks of the Iowa. If you can't beat them, join them. Go to where it's great.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no kidding. I mean, we know that it probably wasn't the turkey hunting that brought you to Iowa, though.
Oh, no. Turkeys, whitetail, all of it. But that wasn't the real reason. The real reason why I moved to Iowa is because I loved it. I fell in love with Iowa back in the early 90s, 1990 as a matter of fact, when I first started hunting Iowa. But I got to know neighbors, friends, landowners, and just kind of became an area that once I started going there, I didn't never want to go back to St. Louis. I wanted to stay in Iowa. So it just made sense for as I get closer to retirement, which I'm not retired yet, but that's coming soon. As I get closer to retirement, I wanted to establish my residency there because that's where I wanted to end my life. Rest of my hunting and outdoor career was, I wanted to be in Iowa, the state of Iowa, and so I moved everything there. Oh heck, over 10 years ago, bought a place, and then since then I've bought a farm, built a house on it, and I spend probably 2/3 of my time in Iowa. I'm maybe more, maybe 3/4 of my time in Iowa, which I'm blessed to have a job that allows me to spend so much time to be able to live in a great state. I'm even an Iowa Hawkeye fan. Go Lady Hawks! They're in the Final Four.
Yes, they are.
All that. I'm in a golf league there where I live. We play golf every week. It's a stake golf league where it's really pretty cheap for 9 holes of golf and a golf cart. And yes, I am a golfer, but no, I am not a very good golfer at all. But I'm even in a golf league there in Iowa, and just enjoy my. I never want to. The only reason why I go back to St. Louis is, of course, to be on duty at the fire station. Other than that, you can find me in Iowa doing something on my farm.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you. It's kind of been nice to get to see you at the local calling contest here in Iowa and catch up a little bit. That's kind of how we met. I jumped in with both feet, and that was probably, that's 17 years ago now. I started calling, and you were at that time you were running the Mid America, and
yes.
And so that's how we met, and I just jumped in with the big boys down there, but one of the coolest things, like you talk about, like the old turkey hunters not sharing very much. That's not really true about turkey hunters today. Most turkey hunters that I know, and now we might not share our secret spots, right?
Sure.
But certainly we will share knowledge as far as, whether it's woodsmanship, stuff we've gained throughout our hunting careers, or even calling. I've learned from you. I've learned from all of the guys that I see at those local calling contests. I've been able to learn a lot about calling, and even just hunting, just talking about how to hunt and that kind of thing. But definitely appreciate being able to catch up with you. Speaking of learning, you do talk about how we today a turkey hunter that's getting into it has so many more resources available to them. And I can remember years ago when I first got into hunting, DVDs and VHS tapes and that kind of stuff were really all you had, other than just getting out there and doing it. And you were you kind of mentioned it there, but you were one of the originals with the Drurys back when that first all started. And you guys really before deer hunting was all the rage and that kind of stuff, and turkey hunting was really starting to gain some steam. Those early days, talk about that a little bit if you can, about working with the Drurys and those early days in the hunting industry.
Well, Mark Drury and Terry Drury literally grew up about 30 miles south of where I grew up. Now, that didn't equate into us running into each other until a turkey calling contest, actually. And so I would be remiss to skip over my early how I got into turkey calling, but that's a different story. I want to explain how I met Mark Drury, and it was at a turkey calling contest. So it was in the mid-'80s. Mark was a young kid, I'm sure high school age, just going into college, and it was at the Missouri State Turkey Calling Championship. And back then, Curtis, they used to just take the top 8, not the top 12, top 8 at calling championships, including the Grand Nationals. And so Missouri took the top 8 callers. Mark Drury did not make the finals in that particular contest. It was his first state contest. I was in the finals. In fact, I think at that calling championship, Walter Parrott won. I was second. I believe Gary Williams was third on down the line. But at that calling championship, before the finals, between the Open finals, the preliminary round and the Open, they took a break, like a lunch break. And I passed Mark in the hallway, and I was with a group of people. Mark was with a group of people. I didn't know Mark from Adam, but I listened to him call. Hold on. Thought we were going on a call. I listened to him call, and he called outstanding. And again, I didn't know him from Adam, and I recognized him in the hallway when I was passing, and as I got closer and closer to him, me being me, you know, Curtis, you know me. I mean, I'm not scared to talk to people. I just stuck my hand out, shook his hand, and I said, and he shook my hand. I said, I don't know what your name is, but you called excellent, and whatever you're doing up on that stage, don't be discouraged. Don't be disappointed. This is just one contest. Maybe your first, I don't know. But what you did up there, if you keep doing it, you're going to do well in a competition. You're gonna be there. Just keep doing what you're doing. Sounded great, and that's how I met Mark Drury. And he said, thanked me, and later that night he went home, talked to his parents, and said, "Steve Stoltz talked to me," which I think is quite interesting because Mark now is one of the biggest faces in the industry, of course. But that's how it really started, and I made a nice impression on Mark. Mark, of course, made a great impression on me. And I don't know, it was a few calling contests later. He invited me at that contest. He invited me to come down and practice with him and build calls. And he asked me to come to dinner. He said his mom would cook us dinner. Of course, you know me, I'll take a free meal anytime. And so I was in. I drove the 30 miles south from St. Louis down to Bloomsdale, Missouri, had dinner with the Drurys, and we started practicing. And within a few years, Mark was at the top of the turkey calling world himself. He had catapulted himself quick. Of course, he's very smart, very intelligent. And he actually placed in the top 5 in the Grand Nationals before I ever did. He leapfrogged over my calling skills very quickly. So that's how we became best of friends. And of course, he asked me to be in his wedding a few years later when him and Tracy got married. And then when he started Drury Outdoors, he asked me, of course, to start with that company. And we didn't know it would turn into what it is today. We had no clue, you know. We just wanted to do a film like Will Primos did when
Sure.
Will did The Truth About Turkey Hunting, which was a classic early. If you ever get a chance to watch the original Truth About Turkey Hunting, go back and watch it. Same way with some of the earliest Drury videos on turkey hunting and turkey calling, like King of Spring, Sound of Spring. They're still great to watch and great to listen to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe I have seen the original Truth of Turkey Hunting. I'm almost sure that I probably came across a copy of that. So, you know, like I got started with just turkey hunting in general, and I'll keep this quick, but I had a neighbor who turkey hunted. My dad didn't, but my neighbor did. And he just whipped in the yard one day, and he lived about a quarter mile down the road, and he whipped in there, and he had a turkey in the back of the truck. And from that point on, I was like, "Ooh, I think I want to do that." And they took me to a turkey hunting seminar, back in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. And I first kind of got the bug, kind of learning and hearing about it, that kind of thing. And I was like, yeah, this is definitely something I want to do. And got a turkey call, a diaphragm mouth call when I was like, I think 10 or 11 years old because it was the cheapest call at Walmart. And my parents didn't want to spend a bunch of money on it. So they're like, yeah, and back then they cost like $2, I think. And so they gave me one of those. And, so that's kind of how I got started. It took me, I actually didn't hunt for turkeys until years later. But I remember the only thing I had to go off of because I was trying to learn how to use that diaphragm call were some of those kinds of videos. And so anywhere I'd search out and see what I could find, and that's what I'd try to find because, there was no YouTube. There was no on-demand video. It was basically, find somebody who had a VHS or buy it. And so, I really didn't buy too many of them, at least when I was that age. After I got into high school and college and that kind of stuff, then I started buying, VHS, and then of course DVDs came along, and there was a lot more content with DVDs once that came about. But that was really just the way to do it. But yeah, I know I've seen a lot of stuff from early in your career and when the Drurys first started and that kind of stuff, just by, that was the only way to get that information.
Absolutely. And side note here, when we started in taking really nice mature whitetails, we didn't do that right from the get-go. We had no clue how to kill big deer on film. We had no clue how to take mature deer with our bow, much less get them on film. So we learned on film. So if anybody watched the original Monster Bucks and Monster Bucks 2, Monster Bucks 3, and of course that turned into Dream Season series because we moved off the Monster Bucks title, and basically Bill Jordan with Realtree and Drury Outdoors, us, came up with the Monster Buck title the exact same year, almost the exact same time. Neither one of us knew we were doing it, and boom, all of a sudden 2 Monster Bucks films comes out, the title Monster Bucks. So one of us moved off the title, and it was a gentleman's agreement. No kicking, scratching, or fighting at all. And we decided to move on because we felt like we could do some other titles that would be just as big as Monster Bucks. Little did we know, obviously, the Monster Bucks title is the biggest thing for Realtree for their titles, and they've done great things with it, and a great cast of people. We think the world of Bill and Michael Waddell and the entire Realtree group, David Blanton. They're like brothers to us. We're all family. We might be in different camps as far as camouflage or game calls or whatever, but as well as I do, Curtis, you've been around enough of them. We're all like family when we're together. So
absolutely, yep.
Yeah, so it's been a great ride. But we've learned to take big whitetails on film, and as we learn that if we pass the 1.5-year-old bucks, we'll get a crack at the 2.5 and 3.5-year-olds, and then we learned eventually if we let those deer go by, eventually we'll get a crack at the bigger, older deer. It just takes a little more time and patience, So
I think that's probably one of the things that made Mark and Terry and yourself probably successful was the fact that you guys were learning as you went, and so you're very relatable that way. I think sometimes people that haven't been through that whole journey with Drury Outdoors, so like if they didn't go back and watch those early years, they wouldn't necessarily understand. If you just know what Mark and Terry Drury have done in the last 10 years, then you might have a skewed perception of what they actually represent. And they were once where everybody else, starts, because everybody starts at a certain level. Most people don't come out to the gate and start shooting, 180, 200-inch deer. Just, it isn't realistic. You gotta, there's a lot of things that gotta go right. There's a lot of other factors that have to be put in place in order to have that kind of success. And so it's kind of cool to hear that part of it, because I think that's probably something that people don't realize or often forget.
Absolutely, and Mark and Terry will be the first one to tell you, and I will tell you, we learned a lot from some of the people we surrounded ourselves with. two of them being Jay Gregory and Don Kiske. Not going to lie to you, those two were very young men at the time that had already figured out how to hang a stand and get a big whitetail, big mature whitetail. I mean, an upper end big whitetail killed on film, and so it was to our benefit. I mean, obviously by taking them on as part of the Drury Outdoors early years cast, they gave us a lot of great advice that we weren't necessarily doing a bunch of hunting the wrong places and or really even doing a lot wrong, but just a little tweaks and a little advice from them made a huge difference, such as paying attention to wind direction, hanging for structure, hanging for wind direction rather than just structure, hanging for success for rattling and calling rather than hanging right in on top of the sign. So a lot of those things we learned from Don Kiske and Jay Gregory in those early years, and that's just a few of them, by the way, that helped our success start to grow. So we as a team helped each other, and therefore we as a team start shooting a lot bigger deer. So pretty cool stuff. And yeah, if those that are listening right now, if you wanna dive into the archives of the Drury Outdoors films and back to the early years, you can go to their website, Drury Outdoors website. You can be a member and join DeerCast. This is not so much a plug, but I won't hunt without DeerCast, and I'm part of their team because it's a great tool to use for the amount of money you spend. It's well worth it. The information that's on that DeerCast, and you can go on DeerCast if you're a member of DeerCast and look at any of those original films from Drury Outdoors.
That's awesome. Yeah. And yeah, I knew that. And also their newest stuff. Like, I mean, fresh content, you guys post that there before it's available anywhere else. And sometimes it's exclusive content, like you mentioned, like you can't get it anywhere else other than DeerCast. So that's good information. So, well, it is spring, so and we kind of started talking about spring turkeys, but word has it that you've already tagged a few.
Yeah, I'm very blessed. Every year I start my season in southern Mississippi. A very good friend of mine back in the day, and Curtis, you've been in the industry long enough, you probably heard the name Tommy Bourne. Yep. And Tommy was a champion caller. He was really a champion owl hooter. It was him and Tucker Crisp and Boyd White, that group, Paul Butsky back in the day. They were all powerhouse owl hooters back in the 80s and 90s, and Tommy was one of them, Tommy Bourne. In fact, Tommy did place in a Grand National owl hooting championship several times. So Tommy and I became very good friends, and started turkey hunting with him. I became friends with him probably back in the early 80s. And so he invited me down to turkey hunt. I started turkey hunting down there with him, and it became a ritual. Every year I would start my spring down there with him, spend a few days with Tommy. We hunted, killed a lot of turkeys together. Well, Tommy was tragically killed in 1997 in a sheriff's deputy event. He was a sheriff's deputy, and they were transporting a prisoner. The prisoner got a hold of a gun, killed both him and another sheriff's deputy. Very tragic. Left a beautiful family and wife. And to be honest with you, and this is after hunting with him for almost 17 years, I couldn't go back down and hunt on my own down there anymore. I mean, I just couldn't do it. I went to his funeral, was there for everything, and was there to help bury Tommy, and then never went back. I just couldn't do it. And then about 10 years after Tommy was killed, he invited me down. His friends. Tommy, of course, God rest his soul, I think had part of this. His friends came to the U.S. Open in Pearl, Mississippi, and when I got done calling, I made the finals that year. In fact, that was the year Chris Parrish won, and I rode down with Chris, and I got done calling, and I was up there, but I don't think I was even in the top 5. But I know I remember calling fairly good, and got off the stage, went back, and I saw his 3 buddies, Bubba, Howard Parrish, and David Davis. And I looked at them and I said, "What are you guys doing here?" And they said, "Well, we came to hear you call." Well, they never called me ahead of time saying they were coming, you know, and I had no clue. And I just kind of smelt a rat a little bit. And I looked at David, and I knew David wouldn't lie to me. I said, "You guys didn't come here to hear me call." And David goes, "Nope, we want you to come back down and hunt." And I said, because I made friends with all these people all those years I turkey hunted. I mean, we had crawfish boils and cookouts and camp, just wonderful, wonderful time. Made many, many great friends. Well, these guys were there to ask me to come back down to hunt. And I said, "Well, I'll come back down under one circumstance." And they said, "What's that?" And I said, "If I come, I want the entire hunt to be on film, and I want to do a Tommy Bourne memorial hunt, and I want it to air on television. I'll get it aired on television, but you guys got to help with the other part of it, the ground and all that." "No problem. You come, we'll have the ground. You just come." So rest is history, man. A few months later, or a month later, I was in southern Mississippi doing the first annual Tommy Bourne Memorial Turkey Hunt. Been going back ever since. And Tommy, God rest his soul, has sent turkeys to us every year on that hunt. And let me tell you, southern Mississippi's not an easy place to turkey hunt.
No, not at all. Anywhere in the southeast is pretty difficult. Compared to what we have in the Midwest.
Yes.
But man, that's an amazing story. I did not know the backstory of that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I try and tell it without emotion because I don't, but we tear up a lot each year. We have a little memorial for Tommy, and we have our little cry and hugs, and this is the way Tommy would have wanted it. Tommy was such a social guy, happy guy, great turkey hunter, turkey killer, and that's how he would have wanted us to continue on, But I went down there, got a turkey. Howard and I hunted together the first morning, and we hunted probably an hour or two. Never heard a turkey gobble. Went into one of his spots that he knew turkeys. He had scouted turkeys, knew they were in there, and just walked and called. Got one to gobble. And next thing you know, I had one at about, I think I shot him at about 35 yards with the old Indian Creek choke and Apex number 9s. And so I got my first bird then. Weather turned really cold down there last week. Down in the 20s. And down south, now in Iowa, if it's in the 20s and clear, they'll still gobble good. But southern Mississippi, those southern turkeys are used to the warmer weather, and when it gets down that chilly, they shut down. It's just completely quiet. So no gobbling activity in the roost. A few days later, I hunted. I kind of guided a friend of mine's son a couple days with no success, and then on the third day of the hunt, Howard and his stepson Bernard, they both had to go and hay cows and do some farm work. And I asked them, said, "You need any help?" "Nope, we got it." "No." I said, "Well, it's 9:30 in the morning, guys." I said, "Do you mind if I go walk one of these farms and hunt for a few hours?" And they said, "Absolutely not." And they said, "As long as you don't mind if we drop you off, because we don't want a license plate from out of state from Iowa, parked at one of our private spots." And I said, "Absolutely. You drop me off, I'll walk on through." They showed me on Onyx, which is what's so great about Onyx. Another plug. I don't care. It's something I won't hunt without. I got on Onyx and marked my spot of where I started, could see the farm, could see where I needed to walk. And every once in a while, of course, I stayed back on Onyx to make sure I was staying on the property. And I took about a 2-hour walk, and about halfway through that walk, I struck one, called it in, probably about I think I struck them about 11:30 and had them killed about 11:45. So,
Awesome.
so that was my second bird for the trip. That was just kind of a bonus bird, but a beautiful hunt. So they weren't really cranking good early, but if you got one to gobble later in the morning, midday, you had a chance to get one.
Awesome. Yeah, those early season hunts like that, even here in Iowa. I mean, I think last year, first season of Iowa, the first day, I think that morning it was in the 20s. But you're right, they will gobble in Iowa when it's that cold, but they definitely behave differently. They can definitely change them up. Well, that's awesome. Like I had seen, of course, social media is great for that. I able to see when my buddies are successful and that kind of stuff. So, congrats on those two getting off to a good start. So, what do you got planned for the rest of the spring? When do you get going again?
Well, from there I travel. My next turkey hunt will be Iowa. I believe it opens in about less than 2 weeks. Am I correct? On the 10th?
Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
So
yep.
I start off on the 11th, and so I'll miss the 10th and 11th, a part of the 11th. So I'm not sure if I'll buy first season tag or not, or just go up. I mean, I'll buy tags, obviously. So haven't decided whether I'm going to for sure hunt fourth season, because one of our tags has to be fourth season. And I might hunt those last few days of first season. I'll see. And then it's on to Missouri. I always do a outdoor rider hunt in the state in Missouri. But before that rider hunt, I'll hunt with my boss for a few days and his brother at their farm in central Missouri. Then I'll travel north to north central Missouri, and I will do a outdoor rider hunt with, of course, Brian Lovett and Curtis. You know Brian Lovett.
Oh yeah.
And we do a hunt every year. We've been doing hunt every year for 20. I'm going to say a string of 25 years straight since we've had the Mad Call turkey camps back in the 90s. Brian and I have become great friends, of course. He's a great friend of the National Wild Turkey Federation. Of course, now one of the outdoor staff riders for the National Wild Turkey Federation. He also helps run the Grand National Turkey Calling Championships, which we got to talk about that eventually in this podcast. But Brian will come down and hunt with me. And do you know, every year since we did the early Mad Call years and he killed his turkey with me, not his first turkey, but his first Missouri turkey with me at that Mad Call hunt, every year since we've had success. He has killed a turkey every year with me for, I'm going to say, 23, 24, maybe 25 straight years. Not missed a year killing a turkey with me. And these are only on 2-3 day hunts.
Yeah, and that's in Missouri, where you guys can only hunt until 1 o'clock.
We can only hunt till 1. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that always, I think it's harder to be successful. Like I always plan, if I go to Missouri to hunt, I always plan it to be about twice the number of days that I would hunt like Nebraska or Kansas, because time. I can hunt. Yeah, exactly. Because you're done at 1, and so you go and do other stuff, fish, whatever the case may be. But that's awesome. Yeah, we actually had Brian on. We had him on a couple of episodes ago, just to kind of pick his brain about Grand Nationals. It was right after Grand Nationals. We talked a little bit about that. Of course, with our format, we didn't get too deep into it, so we'll have plenty to talk about there. As far as Grand Nationals go, and that is a spectacle in itself. If the listeners have not been to Grand Nationals, we're talking about the Grand National Calling Contest that's held in Nashville every year, and it's something that turkey callers across the nation, work all year to qualify for, and then they go down there and take their shot at trying to become the next national champion, and there's multiple different divisions and that kind of stuff, but that is the granddaddy of them all as far as turkey calling goes.
That is the Super Bowl of turkey calling, no question. At Nashville, Tennessee, at the Opryland Hotel. It's held every year, third weekend in February. Always always just remember this: Valentine's week. If it's Valentine's week, we're going to be in Nashville at the end of that week. So they let us celebrate Valentine's Day, usually with our spouses, but our significant other. But the week of Valentine's will be the week of the NWTF convention in Nashville. If you are a turkey hunter, if you are interested in increasing and upping your game, do yourself a favor. Take a little vacation, go to the National Wild Turkey Federation convention. I promise you, once you go, you will never miss another one. You will want to go every year. I think it's the greatest show on earth. I really do. So much so, my good friend Mark Drury, who honestly, like the trade shows and all that, he's so burnt out on all those. I mean, you can't help it. I mean, he can't go anywhere, and he's rushed for autographs and people wanting to talk to him and so forth. And we're blessed that people recognize our faces like that. But the NWTF convention is one he still goes to and still enjoys and loves talking to of course, all the people that recognize him and want to talk to him. So go to the National Wild Turkey Federation if you can plan on it and make your reservation early, because rooms book up fast there. And but yeah, it's the granddaddy. It's the Super Bowl. It's the turkey calling championship. Everybody has wanted to win. That is into turkey calling. And let's face it, turkey calling is not a huge sport, but it is. It means a lot to those in our fraternity, in our industry, and everybody looks at that Grand National Senior Championship as the Super Bowl. That's the one everybody wants to win. I've got one Grand National title in my career, and that's the Champion of Champions. And that was the division where you use multiple instruments to win. The year that I won, names like Dick Kirby and Walter Parrott and Preston Pittman and Tucker Crisp and many now Grand National Hall of Famers and Grand National winners. You have to be a Grand National or a World Championship winner to call in that. And that's how I qualified to call, is I had won the World Championship a few years prior to that in Birmingham, Alabama, for my first major turkey calling championship. And so I was able to call in that one, and that was my second big win. But I've never won the Senior Grand National Championship. The only open win that of all the contests out there that I have never won.
Yeah, it is quite a deal. And what year did you win your Champion of Champions? Do you remember that?
1998.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, Chris Kirby, Chris Kirby.
Oh yeah.
Dick Kirby's son Chris won the Grand Nationals, the senior division that same year. And I remember standing there. We did a photo shoot with Chris Kirby and myself with my Champion of Champions trophy and Chris Kirby's Grand National trophy. And I remember that it was kind of funny because the photo flashes were like, it was like you were at a Hollywood premiere with us, with the NWTF logo in the background, and they're taking pictures. And I remember whispering to Chris Kirby, I go, I'd rather have the trophy you're holding. And he whispered back at me, he goes, don't complain, it's a Grand National Championship.
Yeah, right?
And he was right.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I've gotten the opportunity to, I've called in the prelims several times. I've done the owl hooting. I've done the team event, not in its current format. I think I called in the head-to-head back when they used to do that. It's all, it has evolved. I will say that. The one thing that I think, the NWTF deserves some credit in is, they saw that, it had started to kind of, it wasn't as popular, and they needed to make it of more production, especially for the finals. And they've done that. Even the prelims, though, like you watch in the other contests, like if you watch those on Facebook Live or any of that kind of stuff, or YouTube, what's really neat about it is multiple camera angles. They've got a crane. They're doing all these different things, and it's all live streamed. So it does allow for people to be able that can't travel to Nashville to be able to at least get a taste of what that's like. But, there's nothing, I would encourage any turkey hunters out there that want to become a better caller to just go ahead and give contest calling a try. You will learn a ton from the contestants there, but then just through, getting better at your calling. And Steve, you remember when I first started, and then kind of how I continued to get better. And then like you hadn't seen me in a while. I think it was an Illinois show or something like that. I showed up to do that and jumped into the contest, and you happened to be there. And I remember you saying, you're like, man, I haven't heard you call in a couple of years, but man, that Yelp has come along pretty good. And, that was an awesome, just compliment, to see that I had gotten better, because you hadn't probably seen me in a couple of years, calling wise, at least at a local event. I hadn't seen you
since you were down for the Mid-America Open.
Yeah. Yep. And so, and I worked with, just tons of guys. I mean, Jim Fink kind of started getting me into it and that kind of stuff. And then, he had his kids got older and he got busy and he couldn't really go to contests anymore, and started working with old Tracy Pedretti out of Wisconsin, and Tracy helped me a little bit.
Great guy. So is Jim, by the way.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And, and then just, learning, from those guys, and then, then just my peers that I kind of came up with, like Shane Simpson and Doug Herman and those guys. Like, I mean, we all met each other at contests, but we were all like, I can remember Doug's first ever contest, and it was about my maybe 10th ever contest. So it wasn't like I was a veteran by any means, but I was, more seasoned than he was. And so I remember sharing, explaining kind of how these contests go and that kind of stuff to him. And then, Shane, same way. First time I ever met Shane is he just showed up at a contest one day, and then, he and I, ran around the countryside in the spring, hunting turkeys. Before Victory Outdoors, I would hunt with him at least once or twice during the spring, during his spring travels. But yeah, I mean, just kind of getting to know all those guys, kind of, made me the turkey hunter I am today. And, and then of course, if you venture down into Missouri, you don't have to go very far before you start to run into the likes of Billy Argus and, J.R. Lanham and any of those kinds of guys that are now and still, some of the best, including yourself. Just competing against those kind of caliber, people sometimes are really, can be intimidating, but the thing about it is I don't think I've ever felt slighted or felt like I was an outcast ever at a calling contest. Very inclusive group, people that like to, share their knowledge and are pretty well open. I mean, some people, if they're quiet, it's because they're probably shy. they aren't just as outgoing as maybe some of the others, but they're not that way to be rude or anything. They're definitely willing to share what they know.
Oh, absolutely. And so let's go back to when I first started turkey calling. I told you I'd save that story for later, and I'm going to tell you, this is how calling contests has affected my entire life, as it has yours, Curtis,
yeah.
and so many others. My dad felt like that I was an exceptional caller. So in 1979, I was still in high school. My dad said to me one day, it was in the spring, but before our Missouri turkey season, so I'm going to say sometime maybe in March, probably this time of year, right about this time of year. My dad said, "Would you be interested in going to a turkey calling contest next Friday night?" And I said, "Nah, not really." And he said, "Well, let me just tell you this: a guy by the name of Leroy Braungart is speaking at this turkey calling contest." And I was like, "What? Leroy? Leroy Braungart? He'll be there?" And at that time, Leroy was very, very well known for teaching turkey hunting skills and calling skills, and he was kind of one of the gurus in at least the Midwest area. He was making a name for himself. Very, very good guy, very skilled turkey hunter. And I had listened to a lot of recordings and practiced a lot of calling to what not only him, but also a guy by the name of Roger Latham. You probably heard that name, Roger Latham. And back then, that's all you had, and there was 45 records. You put on record and listen to it, and then later on, they had the same recordings. They put on those big cassette tapes, big 8-track tapes. And so I said to my dad, I said, yeah, I would love to go to hear Leroy. And believe it or not, I was not that interested in a calling contest at all. But so a couple days before the contest, so the contest was a Friday evening, like on Wednesday or Thursday, he says, hey, when we go Friday night, would you bring your turkey calls with you? I said, my mouth calls? Yes. I said, well, why, Dad? He said, I want some of the guys that are going to be there, my friends. Jerry's going to be there, and he named a bunch of his buddies, Jim and Bill, and he said, they want to hear you call. I've been telling them how good you call. I said, okay, Dad, I'll bring my calls. So we go Friday night to the calling contest. It was called the Gateway Classic in South St. Louis County. And it's a true story. We walk in, and I hear all this turkey calling. You know how calling contests are. We hear all these different callers, and it's very, you talk about intimidating, it's very intimidating to hear these callers. And so we sat down, and Leroy did a seminar. It was a packed crowd. I'd say there was 400 or 500 people in this high school gymnasium. It was crowded, packed. And Leroy got done with a seminar, and they had like tables set up where people were selling their calls and camouflage, and it was actually a cool little contest. And Leroy got done speaking. My dad came up to me and said, did you bring your turkey calls? I said, yes, right here, Dad. I showed them to him. He goes, good, because I signed you up to call in a contest.
Nice.
I said, Dad, I can't call in this thing. I don't know anything about calling contests. He said, well, I just paid $5 for you to call, so you're going to call. Back then, of course, $5 like $50 now. So
Right.
I went up to the table where they take registration, and a lot of people standing around. I finally kind of butted my way up to the table, and there was a lady. There was other people, men and women, sitting there at the registration table, and I said, excuse me, ma'am. She said, yeah. I said, my dad signed me up for this contest. And I said, but I don't think I can call in it. I said, I've never done it. She said, well, here's a list of calls, what you got to do. And on the list was the Kiki Run.
Oh, no.
We didn't have a fall season in Missouri back then. I never learned the Kiki Run. I didn't know how to Kiki Run. So I said, well, ma'am, I said, the Kiki Run, I said, I don't really know how to do that. And she said, well, I'll tell you what, the contest is getting ready to start. Why don't you just walk out and ask one of those callers out in the hallway to teach you, and you'll be fine. So this is true story. So I kind of feel, I've said this before in other podcasts, I feel a little bit like the Forrest Gump of turkey hunting and calling, in that I've met so many great people and been able to hunt with all the greatest in the industry and compete with them and make friends with them and actually hunt with many of them. Well, I walk out in the hallway and I see a guy standing there, looked like the blacksmith from Silver Dollar City, and set coveralls, old camouflage hat, a big beard. And I said, excuse me, sir. And he said, yeah. And I said, my dad just signed me up for this calling contest, and I don't have a clue how to do the Kiki Run. And he laughed and he said, well, son, do you have your calls with you? I said, yeah, right here. He said, well, I'll teach you how to do the Kiki Run. He said, put the call in your mouth. I said, okay. He said, now, when you put your call in your mouth, give me a high note. Just give me a squeal. And I go. He said, perfect. Now, when you're doing that squeal, say P, P, P 3 times, and then yelp afterwards. And I went, he said, hell, son, you're liable to beat me. And you know who that man was?
No.
Ray I. None other than the
awesome.
Ray I. Yeah. Taught me to
Awesome.
key in my first contest of 32 competitors. There was 32 callers, and I took 5th place in that contest. 5th place.
That's awesome.
And that gave me the confidence and the drive to start my calling career. Yes. True story.
That's awesome. When you said it was Ray I, it gave me goosebumps. I was like, yes. I'm like, that's awesome.
What are the odds?
I have a tremendous amount of respect for Ray, and had the opportunity to meet him a couple of times, just on occasion. I don't know him well, but definitely have read and seen some of his articles and listened to some of his radio /
Sure.
I guess now podcasts, but.
Yeah, he does a radio show every week on KFNS 590, The Fan, one of the biggest outdoor radio broadcasts, live radio broadcasts. I know it for sure in the Midwest, and one of the biggest in the industry. Ray does, every week.
Absolutely.
Every Saturday morning, 7 a.m.
Yeah, and so one of the things, and this is something that I give him credit, like, because I do. I give turkey seminars and that kind of stuff, and so I use one of his quotes, and I give him credit. I have him right there up on my PowerPoint and everything, and I said that, the great Ray I said, don't, and it goes back to the calling too much. There's no such thing as calling too much, and he's said, don't remove the thing that makes turkey calling great from your hunt. Continue to call it turkeys. Turkeys are used to hearing calling throughout the entire year. You calling to them is not going to mess up your hunt or mess up hunting for anybody else. Now, people pressure, and this is where he goes on to say, he's like, people pressure, people being in the woods, walking around the woods, added pressure that way, whether it's mushroom hunters or whether it's other turkey hunters or yourself turkey hunting, that can change the turkey's habits and patterns and that kind of stuff. But the simple act of calling to them and calling often and calling a lot and that kind of stuff really does not have an impact on that. And so that's something that I cover when I talk to it. Now, there are times where you don't want to call to a turkey, like if he is in an open field closing the distance, like don't screw up a good thing. Like if he's closing the distance, you don't have to call. Don't call.
Exactly. Yeah, let them find you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. Or if you're using decoys and they're on their way into your decoys, the only thing you can do by calling is screw it up. I mean, now I'm guilty of doing that because I get a little too I get a little too anxious, and I want to hear that bird gobble, or I want to see them gobble, like they've been gobbling their head off as they've been coming in, but then all of a sudden they get within 50 yards, and for some reason my mind circuits, and it's like I gotta hear them gobble, or I gotta watch them gobble, or something like that.
Sure.
And I've had that burn me. It doesn't always, but like I said, you might not screw up your hunt by calling to them as they're closing the distance, but you can definitely, it's the possibilities there. You're not going to help them come any faster. They're on their way in. They're going to close the distance. Just be patient. They're going to get there. But, that's something that I usually try to teach in my seminars.
Well, and you bring up a good point, and Ray is right. You can't really overcall a turkey, but what you can do, and I'll refine it from my perspective, is you can call a little bit at the wrong time sometimes. And Ray I is exactly right. Call a lot and call often if you want, but there are a few times as that turkey is coming in, and in particular, if I had to put a distance on it with the last 75 yards, as soon as you start to see movement and see that turkey moving in, you want to back that calling down a little bit. Make him find you. Make him walk over you. Back off the calling. And let's talk about that real quick. And I think that's one of the most overlooked things. Somebody asked me not too long ago, maybe at the NWTF convention, or maybe I was doing a different podcast, but or maybe it was on Deercast. But they asked me what might be one of the single most important calling. Pick one single calling. My favorite tactic that you can tell a caller to do to increase their success. Well, here it is. Learn the soft stuff. Learn how to back off that call and do the soft stuff. Now, I don't know when I was running the key if that was blowing your mic out or not. I don't know. But
No.
for example, when you're calling, learn this stuff. And I've taught so many people over the years through videos and of course Drury films and shows. But I'll say it again. I do the same thing. Put the call in your mouth and flutter your tongue. Only with the call. And then sound chamber it. That is what pulls a turkey over you. You want the turkey to think that that hen is 20, 30 yards, 40 yards behind you. You want to pull a turkey over you. If you call too loud when that turkey is at a certain point and knows he can see the hen, you can do what you just mentioned, Curtis. You can very well make them keep that distance because they know they should see that hen.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I mean and you're absolutely right. As far as, guys learning, I mean, everybody pretty well knows how to yelp. They know how to cut. They know how to do the loud stuff. That's the easiest thing. It's the first thing you learn how to do. And then guys can cluck and purr and that kind of stuff, but then learning how to tone that down, then add in those little whines and those little bubble clucks and that kind of stuff that get basically those birds to finish, strong, like to get them in. And one thing I always say, like whether you're using decoys or not, and this is something that I like to do. I always use a single Jake decoy if I use one at all. Sometimes I don't use them at all, but when I do, I use a single Jake decoy, and it has to do with calling because I am the hen that he's seeking. I don't need him to see a hen because I'm the hen that he's seeking. So if he happens to see the male decoy, the male Jake decoy, then he'll come into that, and that might help finish, especially in hay fields where my cover's limited and that kind of stuff.
Sure.
In the timber, I almost never use decoys. I've tried it and had some bad experiences, but one of the things that I absolutely think is vital is you're the hen. You're what that gobbler is seeking. And so to be able to do all that, to be able to do that full vocal range and be able to get into that soft stuff really is what helps you take your turkey hunting to the next level. I mean, it's great for contest calling and stuff too, because it'll impress the judges, but most of us got into this to kill turkeys, and that's what's the most important part of it, and that will really, really up your game.
Absolutely. One of the things that, a turkey, it depends on what mood you catch a gobbler in. There's so many variables, but one of my calling techniques that I love to use in the woods is always start soft. Even when I'm trying to locate, I'll start with a softer series of cuts and yelps, and then if I don't get an answer, then I'll call louder, and then the third time then it's ghetto blaster. It is, announce to the world that a hen is wanting to breed so I can get a turkey to gobble. And the reason why I start off soft, my first series, even when I'm locating, is there could be a turkey 100 yards from you. I mean, and if that's the case, you don't want to call too loud to get them to gobble. So many, many times I've called real soft and one's gobble real close, and I'm like, oh, thankfully I didn't call real loud, because that could get them to hang up. And again, I'll go three levels. Soft. I'd say not. If I'm striking for a bird, it's not going to be as low as I just did with the cluck and purr, but it's going to be a softer cut and yelp. And then if no answer, then I'm going to do about a medium cut and yelp, if I'm doing turkey sounds. And then if they don't answer that, then I am going to get out my new Fusion by Woodhaven, which I love. I also like the Anodized Ninja. I love a metal call, an aluminum surface call, an anodized aluminum call for locating turkeys. Will not hunt without them because they have that high pitch. You can run it with an all-weather, either a carbon striker or an all-weather striker, and it has that high pitch that will yank a gobble out of them when no other call will. I still believe in high frequency and the high frequency angle that we used to preach so strongly back in the early Drury Outdoor and Mad Call days. It still pertains to today. Even though I'm with Woodhaven Custom Calls right now, I help build and design those calls. And one of the things that we incorporate is not only realism, but we try and build some of that high frequency in some of our calls that will make a turkey gobble when other calls won't, and including the box call. It's why I run that Woodhaven Real Cherry Hen. Favorite box call. Will not hunt without that box call. It's got a higher pitch yelp, but a real yelp that makes them gobble.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing, good box calls are a must. I always have to have a box call on me. I also believe I like the aluminum. I usually have 2 pot calls. I have a glass pot call, and then I carry an aluminum. And so I don't, if I'm going to be soft and subtle and that kind of stuff, it's going to be a diaphragm call. And I'm not going to really, by the time I need the soft stuff, I don't really want anything in my hands other than my gun or my bow. And so that's kind of the way I set my vest up is, my slate calls my pot calls are going to be glass and aluminum, and they're really, like you said, they're to reach out there and get those birds to gobble. They're my louder calls, where I'm trying to get a little better distance. And then a box call, same thing, same concept, but really is almost vital if you have any kind of wind. If you get that wind condition going and you got anything that's a 10-mile-an-hour wind or stronger, you almost have to have a box call. And you're going to hear that bird gobble, and you're going to be amazed and be like, I can't even believe they can hear me. But they can. And that high-pitched box call, or even those aluminum or glass calls or crystal, that stuff's really, really, really good for getting that high-end stuff. So,
yeah, I do not know what that is. I can tell you this: I won't hunt. I hunt with multiple calls. I will not hunt with just mouth calls. I take a array of mouth calls, and so I can rotate through them and always have a fresh one. And sometimes different mouth calls have a little bit different pitch and sound, so they'll answer better to one than they will another one sometimes. Same way with in my vest, I also will have the Real Hen box call by Woodhaven Cherry. I prefer the Cherry. I'll have the Legend Slate. It's my favorite slate call by Woodhaven. It's called the Legend. Love it. It's reliable. It's a good sounding call. There's great soft cluck and purrs, tree calls, and it does great cutting and yelping. So it has all the wide variety of sounds. And then I'll hunt with the Anodized Ninja. Or now I've been this past trip I used the new Fusion, which is a anodized aluminum surface call with an all-weather striker for locating. So I'll keep an owl hooter and a crow call with me. I, of course, try and get turkeys always to gobble with a non-turkey sound first. So if it's up during the day, I'll try crow calling first. I'll try owl hooting. None of that works, then I try a turkey call. Again, soft, medium, then final loud. And many times I don't get a gobble till I do that loud. So, but a lot of times I'll do that first series of soft calls and they'll gobble close, which is what happened to me this past week here in Mississippi on that hunt I talked about earlier.
Yeah. That's good advice for the listeners out there to kind of scale up those calls and be able to work into that. And I agree. I mean, I'll start with locator calls if I'm kind of working my way through a property and kind of trying to locate birds and that kind of stuff, especially middle of the day. First thing in the morning, hopefully I got that scout. I've done my homework and I got it scouted out, to a certain degree. Kind of know where I'm going to start anyway. That's what I like to do. But I mean, it's getting to be that time of the season, man. More and more states are opening up every weekend, and before long, everybody will be at it.
Go ahead. What I have to say about the spring turkey season is pretty much on target in Florida. Florida's weather start warming up pretty early, and their spring turkey season is pretty much just how it usually is, right in line. I'd say you're a little further north, you're Alabama, Georgia, of course Mississippi, where I went, your southern states north of Florida. The spring is still a little early. They're still henned up heavy, not a lot of gobbling activity in a roost. Stay with it throughout the day, stick with it in areas you got turkeys, and you might find success striking one later. And then when you do, get ready, because a lot of times they're coming. And one of the things that if I ever do a book, Curtis, on turkey hunting, I'm going to spend at least a chapter on depth perception. And that's one tool that a lot of outdoor writers don't write about, or there's not a lot of information out about learning depth perception. But how far a turkey really is from you when he first answers you is very critical on your success of actually getting that bird killed. Because if you think that turkey's too far and you're set up, you're not set up in the right place to kill him, you're not going to kill him. If that turkey sounds way far away and he's close, you're going to move too close and bump him. So there's a lot of variables in learning depth perception that I've learned over my years of turkey hunting that are crucial and critical for killing turkeys, especially when the going gets really, really tough. Because down south, the underbrush and the timber, and everything is way much more thicker, if that's a good word to put it. Even Florida's even worse. You got swampland and creeks and moss and palmettos, and those turkeys gobble. And man, if you can barely hear them, they may still only be 75, 100 yards away from you. It's crazy. And if you're used to hunting in Iowa or Missouri, that turkey sounds like he's a quarter mile away, and a turkey's right on top of you. So you learn how density in different terrain in different areas of the country affect your turkey, how far a turkey is from you.
Absolutely. And one thing that, especially here in the Midwest, when turkey season first starts early in the year, there's no leaves on the tree. There's no leaves on the trees. There's, not any other vegetation out there. And so a lot of times birds sound closer than they really are. And then, you get into like four season here in Iowa where you're into May. And depending on how warm that spring has been, depends on how much is leafed out and that kind of stuff. And so that can vary. Like last fall here in Iowa, it was kind of a late spring. And so it was like the first week of May before everything really exploded with leaf out. And sometimes I would say we were about 2 weeks behind as far as that goes. I can remember the cattle guys that I talked to, they were worried about, getting their cows back out onto the pasture because we hadn't had much moisture and we hadn't had very much, warm days as far as to get that forage to grow so they could put their cattle out on the pastures. That was kind of good for me when it came to turkey hunting because it meant I didn't have to deal with cattle in pastures that I wanted to turkey hunt. But, I just remember that sticking in my head that guys were, I remember leaf out. And so one of the things that, turkey hunters will want to remember is, when it comes to that depth perception, trying to determine how far away that turkey is, look around. What do you have for foliage? Is there anything leafed out yet? And then if you went first season in Iowa, and now you're going, and that was like the first week in April, and then you're going, in May, and it's almost 3 to 4 weeks later, kind of remember, even if you're in the same spot, that turkey might be, in a similar spot, but it might sound like it's further away now that you have actually a bunch of leaves on the trees.
Absolutely.
That's a great tip.
I always want to remind everybody that's listening to this that you don't always hear all the turkeys that are actually answering your call, especially when you're by yourself. So when you call, turkey could be gobbling as soon as you start to hit the call. You're done calling, you hear nothing. You're like, this place sucks. I mean, I'm moving on. There's nothing gobbling here.
Yeah.
And when in fact a turkey did answer, and because he's down over a rise or down in a draw or maybe down by out in a field, where the depth perception is tough to gauge, you didn't actually hear it because you were calling. If you're partnered up with another hunter, make sure you two separate. If you're hunting with your your child or your hunting partner or your wife or whoever you're hunting with, separate out about 15 yards apart, 10, 15 yards. Get some distance between you two before one or the other calls, so the other one can hear what's answering the caller, if that makes sense. And a lot of times, that second person, the one that's not doing the calling, they're the one that will hear the turkey. And of course,
Absolutely.
And of course, depth perception. With depth perception comes coursing, and that's another, again, including in that chapter, is coursing where that turkey is. Is he to the right? Is he straight ahead? Is he to the left? Is he behind you? And a lot of people can't course the bird. So learn coursing skills, learn depth perception, learn things like that. Learn little things like no turkey sounds that aren't turkey calls. One of the biggest things that will help you kill more turkeys than any one single turkey call is learning the spit and drum and how to listen for it and how to gauge how far it is and how to gauge if you're hearing it, whether you're hearing, because a lot of times you're hearing that spit and drum, but you're really not realizing you're hearing the spit and drum. And that's so important because turkeys don't gobble 95 to 98% of the day. They only gobble the first few 30 minutes, an hour of daylight, mostly. And they usually won't gobble on their own continuously all up through the day. If they do that, then it's probably pretty good turkey hunting in your area. But very seldom does that ever happen. So if you learn that spit and drum, which a lot of times you just hear that, the back end of it, and the spit would be the. So point is, if you get used to hearing that, sometimes you can have one roosted or know an area where birds are and nothing's gobbling, not a peep. It's starting to get light. You're owl hooting, you're crow calling. Well, if you get listening and you hear that spit and drum, the reason why they're not gobbling is they may see you doing the crow calling and doing the owl hooting or doing the turkey calling, and they're up in the limb, and maybe they don't see you, but you're so close they don't have to gobble. And so, same way with when you're on the ground later in the day, listen for that spit and drum. A lot of times turkeys will shut up, and you're like, well, should I move or should I stay? Be listening for that spit and drum, because a lot of times if you hear that spit and drum, you don't need to be moving. They're coming, but they're just coming in quiet.
Yeah. That's definitely a good tip there, because there's been multiple times, especially when I snuck in closer than I wanted to be on a turkey on the roost, and I heard them spit and drum way before they ever gobbled. As a matter of fact, like the last time I did that, I had a bird 40 yards in front of me on the limb, and he strutted and strutted and strutted and gobbled and gobbled and gobbled once it got light. But I had decoys out, but I guarantee you he saw me put those decoys out. And I was sitting there and I heard him spitting and drumming, and I was like, I remember, like, I had my cameraman sitting to my left, and he's like, you hear that? And I'm like, yeah. And I like did one of these. I looked straight up in the air because I thought, man, he might be right above me. It was so close. Like, I knew we were too close in that situation.
Sure.
But the birds that we were setting up on were about 100 yards, basically down this creek draw, and there's a little creek drainage there that we were hunting, and we were up on the top side of it, and we knew these birds would work to us and then eventually out into the field behind us. And so it was kind of one of those things where we had intentionally set up in a spot where we knew we could intercept those birds coming from the roost. What we didn't realize is there was a third gobbler that had roosted up the draw from those other two. And so the other two were down there with the hens and everything, and they eventually started to make their way after they flew down. But that one gobbler never left the tree, and then those other two birds came in, and as they came into my decoys, and I had a single jake out, and the hen started kind of making their way up towards me, but the toms went right to that jake decoy, and I shot, and that bird was still in the tree, and then obviously they all scattered and everything, but I killed the bird I was aiming at, and that was the end of the hunt. But that bird knew something was wrong, and he put on a show. We got some amazing footage of him, as the light was, coming up, and we were facing east. So, I mean, we had some beautiful footage of him on the limb.
Oh, wow.
Didn't ever kill that bird, but, ended up killing one of his buddies that was down the way from him.
That's a cool hunt. But, yeah, you pay attention to those little things. It's the little things that will cost you. Both with turkey and big whitetails or really any game, elk, no matter what you're hunting, it's the little tiny things that'll cost you, not the big things. And
absolutely,
stuff. By the way, the mouth call I was using is a call that I personally designed called the Modified Cutter. It is in the Woodhaven Custom Call line. Go to www.woodhavencustomcalls.com if you want to take a look at all the calls we have. And
awesome. Yeah, you just real quick. Before we wrap up here, one of the things that you weren't able to make it to the state championships this last year, which afforded me the opportunity to claim my second state title. So thanks for not showing up.
Well, congrats to you. No, look. Last year I completely forgot to do a call at the state championship.
Yeah.
No, that was at the Mid-Iowa.
Mid-Iowa, the one I run.
Yeah, I completely forgot to, and I didn't feel so bad because Jesse Martin, who I think the world of, Jesse Martin's one of the top callers in the industry today. I think he started a company called Black Label Game Calls. Good for Jesse. Congrats. Yep. Jesse Martin, I'm a big fan of you. And I don't care. Go to Black Label. Hope to give him some business too. But Jesse builds a great line of turkey calls, and Jesse completely forgot to do the cluck and purr last year in the Grand National Finals. Just completely forgot to do it. That was in the finals. So, ironically, just a week or two later at the Iowa Deer Classic, here I am calling, and they asked for a call, and I did a completely different call than they asked for. And I looked at my list, and I just did the call in the wrong order. So I literally didn't do one of the calls they asked for. And, of course, I didn't place and didn't deserve to place because of that. But so. Yeah,
it happens. I think it happens to the best of us. That just proves it. I mean, Jesse, top of the top as far as, that upper echelon callers goes. And it happens. I mean, you get up there and you have a lapse, in your line of thinking there, or you're thinking, two steps ahead and should have been, thinking about what was actually asked. But it happens. And,
sure.
And honestly, so something to kind of keep in mind, the Mid-Iowa Classic, though, will host the 2024 state championship.
Oh, okay.
So
kind of a dual thing?
So the Manchester contest, they're not going to do it anymore. They informed me of that at the Mid-Iowa. And they just, unfortunately, they just don't have the manpower and the people to do it anymore, and the organizers to do it. But so we're going to take over the state championship there at the Deer Classic with the Mid-Iowa. We'll have, and I don't know, I might even rebrand it and just call it the I might just call it the Iowa Championships. Or something like that, or the Iowa Championship Classic, or something along those lines, and just rebrand it.
The Iowa Championships, and still have the Iowa Mid Iowa Classic for whatever you want,
right.
and then have your determine your state champion, Iowa state champion from. So yeah. That. Well, I'm excited.
Yeah. So
bad news in a sense, but excited that the venue at the Mid Iowa Classic is second to none. To me, the Mid Iowa Deer Classic is the National Wild Turkey Federation for deer, what the National Wild Turkey Federation convention is in Nashville for turkey. So a great venue, and there's still a lot of great big turkey audience at that Deer Classic. I mean, most of those guys there are turkey hunters as well. So great venue, great place to have it. Should be a great contest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're excited, and
I'm not quitting yet. Just so you know.
That's okay.
I'm going to be there next year competing. I'll eventually get out of it, but heck, I just made my third Grand National Finals in the last 5 years down in Nashville. Ended up 7th in the Grand Nationals, and I think I had a pretty darn good run. And I had a good run in the prelims. So, I mean, I know I'm old, and I know I probably should get out of it soon, eventually here, but I'm having fun, and my scores are coming out right with the Josh Grossenbachers and the Matt Van Sices and the Jesse Martins of the world, so why not keep calling for a little bit?
I mean, yeah, people don't understand how hard it is to make a finals. I mean, like, you talk to, like, guys who have called for years, and they've called in the prelims and never made the finals. And really for them, probably making the finals would be the pinnacle. I mean, just because it's very, very hard to do. I mean, that in itself is a feat. And then, to do well, to be even 7th is phenomenal. So congratulations on that. And no, I don't want you to quit. I mean, I am a firm believer in, I've been fortunate enough to beat a lot of callers that I looked up to and that kind of stuff. But, I mean, you win some, you lose some type of thing. And when it's your day, it's your day. And last August, it was one of the only times, Steve, that I walked on stage and I just felt like I didn't have anything to lose. Like, that contest hadn't been held in 2 years because of COVID. And it was the first time they had held it, and I was like, you know what? This is the first contest I've called in 2 years, because I don't usually call it the Mid Iowa because I'm running it.
Yes.
And I'm like, bottom line is, like, I hadn't called, and I'm like, you know what? I practiced a little bit. I did my due diligence that way. I did put a little practice in, but I went up there so relaxed and so calm because I just felt like I'm not here to win this. I'm here to just have fun and actually get back into a contest, because I haven't called in 2 years because of that. And I think that's really why I won, because I just went in there and just had fun, and.
Well, that's cool, and you did well, and congratulations. I can tell you this: it's not easy. I don't care who's there or who's not. It's never easy to win a calling contest. It never is easy.
Yep.
I don't care what the title is, what region it is, what part of the country it is, and to your point, making a Grand National Finals, that's the toughest feat in turkey calling today, is to make that top 12. If you can make that top 12 in Nashville at the National Wild Turkey Federation Convention, at the Grand Nationals, or even the top 12 at the World Championships, which, by the way, if you're interested in the World Turkey Calling Championships or listening to it, it'll be held June 9th and 10th in Mobile, Alabama. Or that might be 10th and is it 10th and 11th? I don't have a calendar handy. I don't have my phone handy. But that weekend, the preliminary will be on Friday, I believe it's June 9th. And then the finals on Saturday, June 10th. That's a World Turkey Calling Championship in Mobile, Alabama. But making that finals in the Grand Nationals is a feat. If you do that, you're one of the top callers in the United States. There's no question. And
absolutely.
I've been very blessed, Curtis. I've been in that finals 19 different times in my calling career, which you like you said, if you just make it once, it's an accomplishment. So I'm very proud of that. I'm also very proud. I know I'm old. I get it, but I'm very proud that I'm probably the oldest to have ever been in that finals of the Grand Nationals. So, which goes to show, age means nothing. If you make it turkey, it's going to score.
Absolutely. Yep. If it sounds turkey and the judges will score it, there's no doubt about that. Well, Steve, it's been an honor to have you on, and it's been great to catch up with you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I enjoyed being on your show, buddy. We've been great friends throughout the years in these calling contests. Don't get to see you enough, but maybe once I retire, I'll be in Iowa a little bit more even, and we'll cross paths more often. So.
Absolutely. One of these days we gotta get in the woods together and shoot a turkey.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I'm down. I'm down in Cantrell, right on the Iowa-Missouri border.
Yep. Yeah, I know.
And you're welcome to come down. You're welcome to come down and hunt with me. Anytime. Just give me a heads up and come on down. I got ground we can go.
All right. Well, sounds great. Thanks, Steve, and thanks to all the listeners for joining us today. I hope you learned something about turkey hunting, and Steve, good luck this spring, and to all the listeners out there, good luck as well.
Thank you. Be safe, everyone.